I was groomed to sign my first billion-year contract when I was 5.
A 7-year-old is taking care of a 3-month-old, and then who's taking care of a 7-year-old? A 12-year-old?
It was exactly like Lord of the Flies.
The adults they have taking care of you are like the people they don't want the public to see.
She said to me, "Do you remember how they bathed you?" And I said, "No." What are you talking about? We were like livestock. We had no value and we were being penned. I would pull my shirt over my mouth so that cockroaches wouldn't crawl in my mouth.
We got to talk about this FBI raid, the largest FBI raid in history.
My brother at 16 was in a concentration camp in Hollywood, 7 years. He started a relationship with Bella Cruz, Tom Cruise's kid. She told me some of the craziest stuff.
Tell me what Bella told you.
There's a Scientology Hogwarts school in rural Oregon. I'll tell you a crazy story that I've never told.
You ever watch those what's his name? Kenneth Copeland. You know who that is?
No.
He is a television pastor, and I forget what his show was. It's like, is it the 700 Club? It's one of those ones where he's like fire and brimstone, and he's really intense. And then they found out, in the last like 10 or 20 years, he's been around forever. They found out in the last 10 or 20 years, he has like 2 private jets, and his excuse was he doesn't want to fly with demons, and there's demons on like commercial airplanes, and just like weird shit like that. And then there was a reporter that went and confronted him and was like, "You have all this money, but you're, telling people to send in their wedding rings and stuff for your church." And he like gets all wide-eyed and he's like, "Don't you ever," and it's like turns into this like weird, like religious demon guy. And the clip goes viral because it's crazy to see this dude. And it's actually insane how rich these people are, because you're like, who the is watching this guy and is like, "You're not a psychopath." Like he's readily, clearly, very transparently like not all there, and like but people like cults are crazy like that, dude. I guess I don't have to explain that to you.
Yeah. I know it all too well. I mean, I kind of wig out when I think back on what the behavior of the people that ran it and how I somehow found a way to look up to them or think that they were credible human beings at all. I mean, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
Man, you've had just a very interesting childhood. I'll give you that. Your story arc is something else.
Yeah. I mean, on the day of my birth, I was handed over to a religious paramilitary organization, high control authoritarian group, whatever you want to call it, on the outskirts of downtown Los Angeles in a slum tenement where I spent the first 2.5 years of my life with little to no human touch. And that would be the beginning of pretty much a 20-year gauntlet where I wouldn't go to school and I would literally be animalized.
Hell of an opener, Jamie. Like but no exaggeration. I mean, the book starts with The Baby Factory, and we link to the book in the show notes. So folks, if you buy books from the show, which you should, please use our links. It supports the show. The book starts with The Baby Factory, as you call it. Tell me about that. Because one, it sounds gross, not to mention, illegal, but tell us how that works. Well,
basically, in this group, the children, the basic belief system is that we're all trillion-year-old fallen gods that have had millions and billions of lifetimes before. So you're not really a baby. You're a fallen god, complete adult that's been an adult millions and millions of times in a baby body. So you don't really need to be treated like a baby or a toddler. You just need to remember. The idea is that time is running out to save the planet. If we don't, get rid of everyone's reactionary mind, we're going to die in nuclear fire. We have a limited time. So kids are a distraction. And they need to be penned over here like livestock until they're 10 or 12 years old, and we can put them to work. And then they spent no money on the facilities because we weren't useful, we weren't contributing. And the least important people, the people that they couldn't put on real jobs, were the people that were made the quote nannies or caregivers.
I see.
Yeah.
So I guess I wondered about that, because in Scientology, once you don't make any money from a day job, or you can't volunteer for a 16-hour workday doing something else, like what if you're 75 years old? Are those the people that they're saying, "Hey, you're taking care of a bunch of kids now"?
Oh man, that's such a good question, because it's changed. Like a lot of the people that were kind of adults when I was a kid are now aging out, and they're putting them in like these kind of really cheap old folks facilities. And that has its own set of new abuses connected to it. But it's more like it was the crazy people from the 70s that did too much acid and like, oh, we can't have those people in this organization or around. the public, let's put them around the kids. And so,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so it was a pretty, yeah, I mean, it was a brutal experience. And what's so crazy about it was just how long it lasted. And then I'm still standing because so many of the kids I grew up with have had, they have autoimmune disease. There's suicides, there's drug overdoses, there's drinking yourself to death from just the stress of it. But, one of the doctrines was, emotion is kind of looked down upon. They call it HENR, human emotion and reaction. So if you're 4 years old, you trip and fall, you're bleeding. They would do some kind of, thing to maybe stop the pain, like this laying of hands thing that they do. But they would also say, stop the human emotion and reaction, knock it off. And so emotion is not allowed. So then when you hurt and you're kind of looked upon as a leper, if you hurt yourself, you're labeled a potential trouble source, PTS. And so you get this horrible scarlet letter and stigma if you get sick or you get hurt. So you learn as a little kid to hide being sick or hide being hurt so that you won't be punished or treated like an outcast.
Yeah, that does not sound healthy. So the kids in this, what was your barracks like, or what was your sort of kid dorm situation?
Well, at the baby factory, which was, not far from MacArthur Park, if anybody knows downtown Los Angeles, which is full of junkies and, and the Rampart Police District, that was just like a really rundown tenement building with peeling paint. And, one of the stories that I talk about in the book that a caregiver reached out to me when I first started doing interviews 2 years ago, who was a 7-year-old girl that was taking care of me. I'd been in this woman's head for 45 years or something, right? I mean,
a 7-year-old girl was taking care of you, and how old were you?
A baby, 3 months old, 6 months
Unbelievable.
old. And I stuck in this woman's head, who's now in her 60s, right? Or something, 60. Mm-hmm. And she said to me, do you remember how they bathed you? And I said, no. What are you talking about? And I kind of remember staring up the ceiling as my earliest memories, if they're real, right? But she said that this is how there would be 40 kids to 1 or 2 caretakers. So they would run a hot bath once every week or so, and they would take off your diaper, dip you in, wipe all the stuff off, hand you to the person that would then dry you off. And then they would dip the next baby without cleaning the water. So I was basically being dipped in feces for the first 2 years of my life. But that was 811 Beacon Street, which was a kind of just a weird, old, massive Hollywood house that had just gotten run down and was a tenement right on the outskirts of downtown Los Angeles. Then we went to the place that was really the worst place of all of the experiences, which we called the Melrose Building, the red brick building, which was carpeting that hadn't been cleaned in 50 years. So it was like a dirt color shag with steel bunk beds stacked 3 high. I moved there when I was 3 and I was on the 3rd bunk, constantly falling in a and there would be 14 of these things crammed into a small room. There wouldn't be a lot of room to walk between the bunks, and then a kid stacked 3 high on each bunk.
Right. Oh my God. What are they doing with you? Like waiting for you to be old enough to work or something? Is that kind of the idea?
It's interesting. When I first started kind of talking about the book and I was telling people about the living conditions, people would ask me, they would say, why would they even do that? Why?
Yeah.
It
like
seems
what's
like
the point?
Yeah, they're going through trouble to put you in these conditions. And I had never really thought about it. Like, even in writing the book, like, why did they do that? And so when I kind of reverse engineered it and I looked at their doctrines, I mean, they have doctrines that intimate this. It's kind of like if Jordan Harbinger, Jordan had got a baby pig that you were never going to keep. It was like an economic gift that your neighbor farmer gave to you. You wouldn't eat that pig tomorrow. You would put that pig in the pig pen with the least amount of resources as possible, grow it for 10 years till it's a giant 300-pound pig for slaughter, right? So we weren't looked at as anything of value until we could work or contribute labor. I never went to school. At the age of 20, I could barely write characters, and I didn't know how to use a comma or construct a sentence or a paragraph.
Okay.
So I was
to be fair, that's most internet commenter. That's most YouTube commenters. But my audience is a little more sophisticated, so we can relate. But
so we were. You have to look at it like we were like livestock. We had no value, and we were being penned. It was literally, and I mean this very literally. And this is why I didn't speak out. I was so ashamed and embarrassed by what had happened to me. Yeah, I'm connected to this like Love Boat sci-fi cult.
Yes.
Right. And I was very embarrassed. It was up until 2 years ago. It was almost like I was living a double life. No one knew. My agents didn't know. My publishers didn't know. I mean, I had to do this kind of walk of shame when I decided to talk about it and call all my people and tell them about this really exotic past that I'd have. It was a very strange couple of weeks for me. And again, as I said, I'm being literal when I say this. I feel like I was being raised in captivity. And,
Absolutely.
And because I was never going to write the story during COVID, I wrote this, and I don't want to feel like I'm hawking it, but I want people to know about it because it actually comes out now. I wrote this kind of sci-fi book, which is this like future adjacent version of Los Angeles called Hybrid. And I wrote it because I was never going to tell my story. So I wrote it as this like sci-fi story. So instead of Hollywood, it's called Follyland. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I tell the story of what happened to me, but there's supernatural powers, and it's all in this weird alternate universe. And I thought, I kind of made it during COVID, and I thought, because I was never going to write my story.
Right.
And then after I wrote Child X, someone bought the sci-fi book and wanted to put it out. So
right.
now it's coming out. Yeah.
Child X is the memoir that I read that we're talking about. And I gotta say, man, do you have any sense of the irony as a kid raised in Scientology, which is a cult/religion/cult started by a guy who wrote a sci-fi book about, stuff like aliens or whatever, turns it into a religion, turns that into a cult that has you raises you get in, you escape, spoiler alert, and write a sci-fi book about it. I'm like, what's your next move here, Mustard? Come on, bro.
That's funny. I never really thought about it like that, but when you say it like that, Jordan, it's crazy. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, it's bananas.
Yes.
Okay, when you say it like that.
We're watching you, Jamie. I got my eye on you, man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they've ever probably dealt with somebody like me. I don't think they've had, I'm kind of a unique animal because I was never going to write about it. And I built this life, and I was living this kind of strange guilt. People, I get a lot of messages from around the world of people, congratulations, and I always take it as like, congratulations on not dying. That's how it feels.
That's what it is. That's kind of what it is. But it is also congratulations on making it out the other side. And I want to talk a little bit more about this, of course. So kids are raising you, and here's the thing. It sounds a little Lord of the Flies-ish, like a 7-year-old is taking care of a 3-month-old, and then who's taking care of a 7-year-old? Is it a 12-year-old? I mean, is it like a military hierarchy of young kids, or does it eventually sort of graduate to adults? But you even said that the adults they have taking care of you, in air quotes, taking care of you, are like the people they don't want the public to see, which I will say, as somebody who lived in Hollywood for several years near all the Scientology buildings, they're not exactly taking the choicest specimens, putting them out on Hollywood Boulevard either. So, like, the bar must be pretty low for child caretaker if those are the people they don't want outside hawking. What are those what is that thing called? They're like, hey, sir, do you want to test your stress levels? And I'm like, no, thanks. I know I'm stressed. Get out of my face, you weirdo.
The electropsychometer.
Yes, exactly. Like, those people are already kind of weird, and they're standing outside in the heat in a shirt and tie trying to rope people in, and you're like, what are you doing? So the people that are taking care of you, I mean, I guess my question is, it sounds like kids controlling other kids, but military Lord of the Flies combo.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect, I mean, it's like you were there, Jordan. I mean, it's both. Okay. So you have the very few, we called them nannies, ironically, even if they were dudes, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
But they were just middle-aged guys that had done too much acid.
Right. Like, you said,
And they're wearing military uniforms. But also within that is this kid thing. And I hate to use Hubbard's words because A, it's an ugly language, and B, because I don't want to validate the language because he has a lot of fancy words to describe horrible, tenement, disgusting, grotesque things. But the official term for the kid organization in these, on a kind of like orphanage type environment where I grew up, was called the Cadet Organization.
Okay.
So it almost sounds like ROTC.
Yeah.
Right. And they're putting us in little military uniforms. I was groomed to sign my first billion-year contract when I was 5. And so you have,
wait, so you're 5 and they're like, sign this billion-year contract. And you're like, dude, I'm not even old enough to sign up for an Instagram account, but I can sign my soul away for a billion years. A number which, by the way, a 5-year-old cannot usually say correctly or spell or knows exists.
I believed in the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus and the Sandman and the Tooth Fairy. And this is a time where I'm going to believe anything anyone says to me.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when they tell me that I'm signing this contract and the reason I'm not seeing my mother is because she has to save the planet. And if I just allow myself to suffer, then I'll see her in a year and we'll get on a spaceship and go save another planet. I believe that as much as I believe in the kind of brick oppressive building with no air conditioning that I'm living in.
Right. Yeah. It's as real to you as anything else in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we have within this structure of these nannies, adults, we have these kids, we have this thing called the cadet organization. And there's a 16-year-old kid, and I call him, Bill in the book. And he's, running like a little military organization with the kids. And it was exactly like Lord of the Flies. You'd go to eat at the galley and the food wasn't very good. And sometimes there wasn't enough. So you kind of had to protect your food.
Wow. Like prison or something.
Yeah. Like I don't want to, my older brother for years, and even maybe the last time I saw him 10 years ago, if we sat down to eat, he would kind of put his arm around his tray or his plate. Like he was eating like that well into his adulthood.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. That's a survival instinct at that point.
Yeah. And then we're doing things to each other. We're being fed this doctrine. It has a huge punishment context to it. And there's all these kind of labels. Like if you're not happy enough, you're down tone. Right. And if you're not, they call spiritual happiness theta. Okay. Because they call the soul theta. And if you're if you're crying or you're making a problem, then you're, in theta, disturbed theta. And so you're trying to avoid all these terms, but then you're kind of learning. Hubbard's doctrine is very brutal. Like people aren't doing.
L. Ron Hubbard is the guy who wrote Dianetics, which is the founding book of Scientology. So he was the founder of Scientology. For people who are like not clued in on this.
And in the commanding officer of the cadet organization's office, there was a little brown box where you could write him letters, even as a little kid, and he would write you back, and it would be signed by him.
Wow. So that was kind of cool at that point, right? It's like writing to Santa Claus, and you get a response.
Yeah, you're writing to the Commodore. He called himself a Commodore, kind of like Gaddafi called himself a colonel, right? And and then and my letters were what a 5-year-old kid would write. Hey, I miss my mom, but I'm, and then he would write back and say, you're doing your job, it was just very strange. But yeah, we were brutal to each other. I talk about these public spankings as a kind of, Hubbard had a doctrine called head on a pike. And if people weren't listening and they weren't being ethical, then you would put a head on a pike to scare everybody into line.
Ethical, but not actually ethical, because like your parents have these parents have ditched their kids. And I'm sorry for saying this. These idiot parents have ditched their kids, joined a cult, and they're not taking care of their own children because they're going to something alien spaceship universe, whatever. And it's just like, that's not ethical. There's no sort of normal society that would ever condone most of this behavior, right? So ethical, according to Scientology, where it's the upside down, everything is backwards.
Yeah, like Jordan, once again, like I never went to school. I never learned to brush my teeth. I didn't have underwear. I didn't have bed sheets. We slept on congealed, oily mattresses in the 1970s drought of Los Angeles, where they emptied the swimming pools, and that's where bowl skating was invented because of the drought, right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so when there's a book called Scientology Ethics, Introduction to Scientology Ethics, and if you read that book, you're making a really good point. In Scientology, ethics is whatever protects Scientology, is what's ethical. And so that's what you're taught and indoctrinated with as a very young age. So you're being brutalized. And then you're being taught that is good and ethical. And then, so many of the kids there were kids that were sexually abused in the buildings because there was no one looking out for us. We were vulnerable. And so the amount of friends that I've lost, I kind of feel like it's really hard to describe the animalization. And if our rooms or our dorms got too dirty, they would put like a sign on the door that we were dirty called Pigs Birthing or Pigs Room, that we were pigs. So they raised us like pigs and they treated us like pigs. It's kind of like, the way I would describe it is, say I was in a trench in World War I and I was with my two best friends on each side of me, and one of them takes a bullet to the center of the helmet, or, and I look over and he's dead. And then and then I hear a gadunk, and I look to the left and there's a bullet in the center of his helmet and he falls over dead. And then I heard a third gadunk. And then I feel my helmet and there's a hole in it. And I take off my helmet and there's a hole right through the center of my helmet. And I'm feeling around and somehow I don't have a wound. And then I get to go home. I get to go back home. And so you get this incredible feeling of A, shame, and then B, I don't want to be a bummer story, but how did I live through this?
It's called survivor's guilt, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. So the military organization called the Cadet Org, or Cadet Organization, the Cadets, where we're wearing little lanyards and little military uniforms, and we have a status and we're treating each other in this military structure and we're calling each other sir, and there's ranks, was very Lord of the Flies. And if you were a higher rank, then you were brutalizing the kids of a lower rank. And it was that was what it was.
So I think a lot of people are wondering, why did the parents sort of stop caring about their kids? Like, what is happening there?
I think that the time that we live in, the time that they were living in is a part of it. Like, they were coming out of the 60s, which was all of these assassinations, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, RFK, JFK, and they, what's the other guy? Medgar Evers. And then you have the Cuban Missile Crisis and nuclear proliferation and Vietnam, right? And that time was just this kind of brutal, the world is going to burn into fire. And so at the end, the 60s, these kids just dropped out and they joined thousands of these cults all over the world, all over the United States, and communes, and they were just done. And it was like, we just need drugs and sex, because they'd grown up under this pressure. So I think, and then they had these post-World War II parents who weren't the most sympathetic people in the world, right? The stoic generation, or whatever,
generation.
The silent generation. So I think that they had this, they just checked out, and then, there was a lot of illegitimate children being born. And so all of a sudden, they're looking for these groups. They were ripe for the picking, and they got caught up in these ideas of these groups that they could save the world and turn it all around. And it wasn't just Scientology. I mean, I think Scientology is the worst one. I think Hubbard created the most sophisticated mind control. I don't know about brainwashing. I don't even know if I know what that is, but he definitely created the most sophisticated mind control system probably in the history of the human species.
Certainly seems quite effective. I mean, it's huge. So I want to explore this detachment a little bit more. Like, on the one hand, it's like you have these past lives, right? So you're a billion lives before, a billion lives afterwards. What does that feel like? Like, on the one hand, you're kind of free, right? Because nothing matters, because you have a zillion lives. But on the other hand, you have absolutely no reason to live well or live at all, because, like, nothing matters. You have a zillion lives, right?
Yeah.
So where do you fall on this?
It's such a great question, and I'll show you I'll kind of answer it in a way to show you how numb and disconnected I was. When I was around 10 or 11, there was a public kid, so his parents didn't work for the inter-religious military like my parents did, where I lived on campus in these tenements. So I was able to go with this kid for the weekend. And we didn't go with his mom, who was in Scientology. We went with his dad, who was a Christian. And he took us to church. And that was the first time I'd ever been in a Christian church. And I'm watching this, and there's all this talk about, you can suffer now for the afterlife. And I remember thinking, I mean, this is just my child mind. I'm not commenting on religion, but I remember thinking, these people are crazy. that they're gonna that they're gonna have this crazy, bad, horrible life now for some heaven that may or may not exist. These people are bananas. That's what I was thinking in my mind. When in reality, I'm living the exact same thing. I'm suffering. I've got massive medical neglect. I'm having these near-death experiences because no one's looking at my body. I'm hiding infections. I'm getting, there was one point where I got into a dental accident and my mouth was basically maimed.
Jeez.
And I'm thinking, well, I'm doing this so that we can save the planet. Right. So I'm actually living the exact same belief system. But you have to understand that the first two things that you do in Scientology, after you do this kind of weird kind of, this kind of drug rehabilitation thing for that everyone does it. It's not scientifically backed, called the purification. Okay.
It's a drug rehab? This I don't understand. What is this?
Yeah. You do this thing called the purification or the purification rundown where you, for 3 to 4 weeks, some people are on it for months, you take large amounts of vitamins and you jog and then you sit in a sauna for 5 to 7 hours a day to sweat out the drugs.
Okay.
And you can't get off of it until you've had some realization that all the drugs are out of you. So that includes medical drugs. Like I had because of medical neglect, I had an ear surgery when I was 6. So I did this purification for the first time when I was 7, okay, where I was sitting in a sauna 5 to 7 hours a day. And then, the first thing you do in Scientology, what I was doing before the purification rundown is the first thing you do is called training routines. I call them non-reactionary drills, where you're forced to sit in a chair, first with your eyes closed, staring at another kid at 4 or 5 years old for 2 hours. And if you move or fidget or blink at all, or if you move or fidget, you fail and you have to start again. They say flunk and you start again. And then you have to do it with your eyes open. And if you blink, you're 5 years old. If you blink, you fail. And
so everyone fails.
Yeah.
Everyone fails.
Yeah. But they're telling you, and you have to do it for an hour or two. And they're telling you that you're learning to control yourself so that when things happen in front of you in the real world, you have the stoic ability to not react. You're training yourself not to react. But what they're actually doing is they're systematically removing your empathy. Right? They're systematically training you to not listen to your nervous system. You're uncomfortable not blinking. You're uncomfortable not moving for 2 hours. You're 5. So you're training yourself to be comfortable being highly uncomfortable. And then they do a drill right after you do the thing where you're staring at people and can't blink, where they get to mock you. Homosexual humor, sex humor. 5, 6, 7 years old, every kind of thing to get you to react. And if you react, you fail. So you basically learn not to react. Then you go out in the regular world, you see a child being hit, you see a child not going to school, you see a child harmed. You've turned off your reaction. And then so that's the training routines. Then right after that, you do a thing, and this is important because I think it'll blow your mind, because I said the most sophisticated mind control system in history. Then right after that, you're doing this thing called the objectives. It's the second thing you do in Scientology. And where you basically, for dozens, if not hundreds of hours, you let someone control you, walk you around a room and tell you to do things, and you do exactly as you're told for dozens, if not hundreds of hours till you have the end phenomenon and you can finish. They're telling you you're doing this because in order to control your environment, you need to learn to be controlled. But really what they're doing, and I would love your take on this, but they're grooming you to be controlled.
Yeah. It just sounds like they're trying to create robot humans that just don't think about anything, don't question anything, and ideally don't even feel anything so that they can just be controlled completely for whatever purpose.
And the language,
I still don't understand.
Yeah, and the language is like that. Like if you know someone and you have to go get something done, they're not a person. Like another person that you would go deal with if you had to get something done is called a terminal.
Oh wow.
Go see that terminal, and they'll help you with that.
Wow.
Yes,
so this is very 1984 somehow.
It is. And that's the irony of it. When I read 1984 at 16, 17 years old, because I could read at a high level, even though I couldn't write from studying the doctrine.
Right.
I remember reading that going, thank God I'm not in a situation like this.
Right. But you were. Wow. You totally were.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's crazy about this is they're basically telling you that your childhood experience, your formative years, don't actually mean anything. And if you're an adult, that's all fine and good. You know, you join a cult and they tell you your formative years don't mean anything, and you can erase your feelings and you can erase your trauma, and you can erase your stress, whatever. But it's completely destructive for a child who's 5 years old and actually in those formative years of their life to have absolutely no mooring, no foundation whatsoever. And it almost sounds like those Romanian orphanages in the 70s and 80s where like they didn't have any touch and they didn't have any care because there was 3 nuns taking care of 400 kids or whatever it was. It's just crazy. And we have sort of unfortunate science experiment that was run in Romania when they outlawed birth control, which is that the levels of psychopathy and antisocial behavior are just like through the roof with those kids because they develop that way.
Yeah, I mean, to answer, I don't know if I even fully answered your question of like what it felt like. I mean, by the age of 5 or 6 years old, I just basically started to go completely numb.
Yeah.
Like at one point I go home to, I go to visit my grandmother in New York every couple of years, and, she puts me in the tub, looks at my body, and I'm rushed to the emergency room because no one was looking at my body. I mean, the level of animalization is hard to describe when it tops, So, and then you're getting this training to not react. And then you're stigmatized if you're emotional or you get sick or you get into accidents. So what it feels like, and then, really to answer your question is like this concept of there's a really strong concept that you're hit with, at 3, 4, that's every day in Scientology, of this concept of the greatest good for the greatest number. And it's very similar to communism. You sacrifice the individual for the will of the state.
Yeah,
right?
That's what it sounds like. Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
So you're being told at 4 or 5 years old, you're suffering when your mom comes to visit you once a week or once a month, and when she leaves, you basically break psychically. I would have these breakdowns where they would like take 3 nannies to hold me back, and then she would leave, and then I would just break. So that would happen, and you're being told that there's planetary salvation at the end of it, and you believe, you're 5, so you believe it, and it is like it's like a Kafka-esque existential nightmare, but you don't know that because it's the only world you ever know.
It's the only world you know. Yeah, it sort of reminds me of like. This is some sort of weird combination between like Mao's China and Pol Pot Cambodia and Romanian orphanage. Like, it's just actually crazy to me. It makes me sad because my son is 6. He's basically still a baby, really. And I can't imagine little guys and gals being treated like that. It's just horrific. Getting him to clean up his Legos and take his shoes off at the door, like that's... We're happy with that. We don't need him to be emotionless automaton. I mean, that's like the opposite of the thing that I want for him. And it makes me wonder who's running Scientology back then? Who's running it now? I mean, do you think that these people are believers, or are they in on the joke that it's all a bullshit grift to get money and power?
Well, the current leader, I think, is both. But I think but I think he is a believer on some level. Again, there's a lot of debate among people that leave Scientology. They form these kind of communities on YouTube and other places. I don't really think they should. They call it a community. And what I always say is, if a bunch of people leave a mental institution, should they have a community? Well, I guess they could have a community, but should they have a community, right? One of the things you see people that leave Scientology do is, everything is done with threat of punishment, threat of brutalizing someone psychically, or through what they call disconnection. If you do something, you're shunned from the group. You can never talk to your friends or family again. That's always hanging over your head. And I find that a lot of people that leave Scientology, they do the same thing to each other for 20, 30 years for the rest of their lives after they leave it. They continue the behavior. And I'm not saying that as a judgment, because I have to constantly look at myself to make sure that I'm not doing that. The black and white thinking is intense. I remember I was talking to Dov Baron one time, and I was telling him it was the most sophisticated mind control system in history. And he said, more than Mao? And I said, well, yeah. He goes, well, I talked to a woman who grew up in Maoist China, and I just asked her a simple question. Anyway, it was the grandchild of someone that had grown up in the Maoist revolution, and Dov had asked her if Mao was handsome. And she said, very. And that, you know, but even that, when I read about other systems like these Romanian orphanages, or I read about things like that, I feel like, and I could be specific, I don't know how specific you want me to get, but I think that Scientology goes far further than Mao or Stalin or anybody else ever went.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were trying to engineer a nation, but everybody still had to do like work, and it was hard. I mean, they had secret police and things like that, but it sounds like you were far less free than somebody growing up in Stalin's Russia.
No, I'm on the streets of Hollywood, and I'm completely a prisoner at the same time. And I'm in slum neighborhoods on the streets of Hollywood, and I'm a complete prisoner. I mean, you had, and also what, you know, there's a concentration camp that's in the paramilitary organization. And if you screw up, and there's a child's concentration camp. It's called the Rehabilitation Project Force. There's one for children and there's one for adults. And if you screw up, you go to this thing and you can be on it for years. My brother at 16 was in a concentration camp run by this paramilitary in Hollywood from 16 to 23, 7 years for having sex with his girlfriend. And you're not allowed to walk. So he was on that thing for 7 years. He did not walk for 7 years. He slept in the tunnels or on these rooms exposed to the roof on, like, you know, mats or old mattresses. He ate slop and was forced to do manual labor 10 hours a day. And then he's studying the doctorate 5 or 6 hours a day and then sleeping for 6 hours.
This is crazy. Why, you're not allowed to walk, meaning you run everywhere.
You run everywhere, and you're not allowed to speak unless spoken to. So say you're a mom or a dad, and you're put on this thing, and you won't be speaking to your child or your spouse for 7 years or 5 years. And if, say, your kid sees you walking down what they call L. Ron Hubbard Way in the middle of Hollywood, North Berendo, when I was a kid, and Dad, he sees you running because you're on the concentration camp, and you wear all black and you wear armbands for what your behavior is, like right out of Dachau or Auschwitz. Okay,
right.
And your kid says,
or whatever.
Yeah. So your 5-year-old says, Dad, you're not allowed to talk back. Unless your kid says something to you, you're not allowed to speak to your child. And so when I was 8 years old, maybe a year after I was in the FBI raid, the largest FBI raid in history, because Scientology had committed the largest industrial spying campaign on the U.S. government in history. A year later, I hadn't seen my mom. She'd been off training. They said, oh, we're going to bring you to see your mom from the dormitories. And she was on this concentration camp. And I just never remember being talked. There was literally like a room with a bunch of card tables, and everybody's wearing black. And it was like a visiting room for a prison.
This is crazy. We got to talk about this FBI raid, because, of course, people are like, wait, what? The largest FBI raid in history. How is that possible?
So when I was 7 years old, I was woken up at 11 or midnight. All of us kids were being jostled out of bed. And we were told that that had never happened before. And we were told that we all had to get up and go over to the main building because there were people that were visiting, and they were going to come in to our bedrooms, and they wanted to protect us from an inspection. I think they might have phrased it as an inspection.
Okay.
Right? So they take us over to the big blue building that everybody sees on TV, which is an old hospital, very Orwellian with a big sign on top.
Yeah.
And they put us into this place called Lebanon Hall, which is a big theater type room where they have speeches, and we're there, and they're just holding us there, hundreds of kids. And then all of a sudden these guys in suits start piling in. So they put us into the next room, and they did that. It was a 24-hour raid. It was the largest FBI raid in U.S. history, domestic, and it still might be, because Scientology had infiltrated the U.S. government and had plants in all these different bureaucratic, these government institutions in the federal and state level. And I mean, there was a woman that again, this is all public records. I'm going to say something that's outrageous. It was called Operation Snow White. They had there's a woman named Paulette Cooper who in the 70s wrote a book called The Scandal of Scientology. They had framed her for bomb threats against the federal government. And she was about to go to prison for decades. She'd been indicted. She was suicidal. This woman also, Paulette Cooper, was a woman that as a baby had survived the Holocaust. So we're talking about a Holocaust survivor. She was about to go to prison. In that FBI raid, and again, this is on Wikipedia. Just Google Operation Snow White. I'm not making. Okay, it sounds crazy. They discovered that Scientology had framed her for these spawn threats, and she was exonerated. So they'd kept us up all night, moving us from room to room as agents poured into the room. I'm a 7-year-old. I'm seeing all this from the eyes of a 7-year-old child. And, when I got older and I looked back on it, they'd accomplished, Hubbard's wife went to jail. Hubbard was an unindicted co-conspirator. 8 leaders of Scientology went to jail. The only reason Hubbard didn't go to jail was because they threatened her and said, if you don't say it was all you, you're going to get this, you're going to be taken out of the will. There's going to be a consequence. Right. So Mary Sue Hubbard, Hubbard's wife, fell on her sword, and she didn't and so Hubbard wasn't fully indicted, which was all lies. He was running everything.
Sure.
And because if you talk to people that were there at the time, they'll tell you he was running everything. And so when I got older and I looked back on it, they exonerated this woman. They found all these crimes. I mean, I grew up with shredding machines everywhere. We were constantly shredding things, shredding documents for Scientology. We didn't even know what they were as kids. We'd walk into a room and there would be a room full of documents, and we would spend days at a time shredding these things we couldn't even read. And so when I look back on it years later, Jordan, it kind of broke my heart that they weren't concerned about us. No, they weren't concerned about how these children were living. But the Scientology was very clever. The living conditions were animalistic and horrible. So they were very smart to remove us from the dormitories. So when the FBI went into the Fountain Building, as it's called, where we lived, was a tenement, they didn't see anybody there. They just saw these like dilapidated rooms with beds in them, and they didn't have a context for it.
Right. Yeah. They didn't want to see a bunch of kids in there, because then it's, oh my God, you're running a human trafficking operation.
Yeah.
Jeez. My God.
Yeah. So
this raid is wild. And the FBI saw all these kids and went, nothing to see here. I mean, I don't understand how they didn't stop.
Yeah, even in the last month, my point of view has changed. I used to look back, when I got a little older, I started thinking, the FBI really failed me, because I almost died. And a lot of my friends, I've lost a lot of people.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, you must have, honestly, I don't mean to be crude, you guys must have smelled absolutely terrible. So how does the FBI see a room full of kids with, facial infections and rotten teeth that smell like a, pile of dung, and they just go, nah, nothing, no problem here. Hey, that room upstairs with 80 bunk beds trapped into a 14-foot room? Yeah. You see this bunch of kids here that are all of ill health and malnourished and have opportunistic infections? Yeah. Anyway, what's for lunch? Yes, they failed you. Yes, they frickin' failed you.
Yeah. I mean, what they did is every time the FBI would spread into a room, they would move us to another room. And I guess what they were telling the FBI is, we don't want the kids to see this, while they were animalizing us.
But also, too bad. We're the FBI. You don't get to decide who gets to see what. You're being raided. Shut up and sit
but
down.
They were raiding them for the infiltration. So I don't know, literally in the last month, as people have reached out to me and write me notes, I mean, one of the realizations I've had, and I love your take on this because I know you lived in LA, is I feel like the city of Los Angeles failed me.
They, for sure, of course. When you walk through Scientology, look, man, I lived on Hollywood Boulevard. There's this dumb museum they have where it's like the L. Ron Hubbard Museum, and no one ever goes in there, and it's like full of lies about what he did. And across the street, there's another thing where he wrote 8,000 novels about all the things he did. They have theatrical productions. I mean, I was surrounded by Scientology, and you see these kids that are like 18 maybe, and they get on a bus, and you can tell they're from Idaho, right? And they're in the big city, and they're kind of scared, and they're in this group. And you're just like, this is labor trafficking. First of all, it's labor trafficking, and that's the part that I can see that's obvious. And I'm not in Scientology. And now you've got whistleblowers and firsthand accounts, and surely you have building inspectors and utility inspectors and police officers that go, do all these people live here? And it's like, yeah, well, that can't be legal. But that's not my job. That's none of my business. You know, like, yes, the city of LA failed and continues to fail. And it just doesn't make any sense to me at all that these people are allowed to work there and make no money. I mean, it's just insane to me that the whole thing even exists.
One thing that I think you'll find really interesting, and this is not in the book, is even though I was imprisoned, I was also free to go between the buildings, right? So I was taking buses down Hollywood Boulevard at the age of 7.
Wow.
And it was my job to pick up my infant brother from the Chateau Elise, what they call the artist center, the celebrity center, which is a couple miles away, and bring him home. So I was going back and forth between the buildings a lot. And then some days, if I wasn't being made to do labor, because I was doing really, I don't know how much you want me to talk about that, but I was doing crazy child labor.
Well, yeah, I do. My next question is, didn't they have you doing literally dangerous specialty HVAC work at like age 8?
Yeah, and hopefully by the end we'll get to some of the good parts, because the story does have at least for me, it has some sort of happy ending. But like one thing I think that I haven't written about and I haven't talked about too much is sometimes I would go off into Griffith Park and I would climb to the Hollywood sign by myself. I would just go to the park to escape, or Bronson Caves. And inevitably on those days, because I never went to school, I was being warehoused. It happened all the time that cops would see an 8-year-old boy by himself, like at the Bronson Caves or walking up past the Greek Theater, and they would pull over and they would say, "Hey kid, how come you're not in school?" And I learned that a magic word, and if I said this magic word, the cops would get in their car and just drive away and ask no more questions. And that magic word was Scientology. If I just told them I was a kid of Scientology, they would just go away.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I guess Scientology, had some arrangement. We homeschool all the kids. Their hours are different. Oh, good enough for us.
I know. I mean, Scientology had done this thing that Hubbard talks about in his intelligence doctrine called safe pointing, where there's all this doctrine that teaches people how to go and make friends with the government so that they will be able to leverage the government if there's an issue over kids or other bureaucratic issues. So one of the things they do, and they just banned this for the first time in 40, 50 years, that all the Scientology events for the last 40, 50 years have been, well, let's say 40 years, have been, 30 to 40 years, okay, they hire retired or off-duty police officers to be the security at those events. Oh, at the end of the year, they have a big celebrity event at the Artist Center across from Birds and La Poubelle and all those restaurants on Franklin called Christmas Stories. All that money, Jordan, goes to the Police Activities League. And you'd see Danny Masterson, and he'd bring in Ashton Kutcher, and they would do this cheesy play. And all that money is going to the Police Activities League. So in a lot of ways, the police were kind of bought off. They're overpaying these guys when they're coming in for overtime. They're hiring retired police officers. So Scientology was deeply in bed with the LAPD, and they call this in Scientology safe pointing the authorities.
I mean, I don't even know how that's legal. Do they allow that? Because I remember when I used to work security in Detroit, we would hire some off-duty cops, and then we could all be strapped with guns. And he was like, "Hey, I don't see those hand warmers, guys." And we're like, "Yeah, we're committing felonies. LOL, you're making $30 an hour." I mean, that's what it was.
Well, crazy to me. It's only in the last year and a half with these non-Scientology protesters going crazy all over the world, but also crazy in LA. There's these non-Scientologist protesters, a couple kids that grew up within it, that have been showing up at the LAPD police council meetings, the public works meetings, and giving them this information. And in the last year and a half, for the first time in 30, 40 years, they're no longer allowing off-duty police officers to do security at Scientology events. For the first time in the last year and a half. I mean, one of the reasons I finally decided to speak out is I felt like we were aging out, Jordan, and our story had never been told. What happened to me as a child of the paramilitary happened over 40 years on 4 continents. Sydney, Australia, Southern England. I mean, Neil Gaiman was part of the first generation of kids that this happened to. But Southern Australia, Southern England, Copenhagen, Denmark, inner city Los Angeles, central Florida, and then satellite locations like Johannesburg, South Africa, and Mexico City.
So, a lot of cults are like this, right? They have these crazy, and people go, why international? And it's because when you are on the outskirts of Sao Paulo, Brazil, and you have a lot of money, you can get away with stuff because you can bribe the government, just like they're doing in LA. I'm not pointing at Brazil. Obviously, LA is thoroughly wrapped up in this, but it's easy to throw money around in a lot of places, including apparently the United States, where we should be better and not allow this, but I digress. And, man, I'm telling you, in the book, folks, you talk about cleaning vents with chemicals as a kid because you can fit in there, not being able to read or write, going to public school and get straight Fs. That's another failure. Like, you're in public school, you can't read, you can't write, and you're like 10, and the school goes, oh, well, guess he's dumb. It's like, no. Hold on a second.
That lasted about 6 to 8 weeks, and then I was sent home.
Okay.
The first time
school sent you home, or
the first Van Ness Elementary sent me home. I was in a class for dumb kids. They sent me home after 6 weeks in the class for dumb kids because I didn't have underwear. Never went back.
Jeez, this is such a failure. And also, they would have noticed, hey, he's not dumb. He's actually very smart. He just can't read or write. There's a problem here. This is abuse, not a genetic failure.
Yeah, but
and he doesn't have underwear.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't have underwear.
Okay. Yeah.
But here's the thing. If a kid shows up without underwear, you don't go, oh, what we're going to do is punish him, because who doesn't have underwear? People who are being abused and or are homeless or are so poor they should be able to get handouts that include underwear or money to get underwear. Like, sending a kid home is literally the opposite of what you need to do. Like, that's just another failure of the system to notice this problem and address it in any way at all.
Yeah, and we had chronic head lice. We would get head lice so bad that our hair would look old and white before they would treat it. We're talking about animalism. I mean, even when I was a kid in the baby factory, I'm spending the first 2.5 years of my life staring up at a ceiling with little to no human touch. How do I describe there was one lady, and this was a generation after me, but that described that we were, as infants, that we were kept inside so long that after 6 months, when they would take us out, we were afraid of the sun. Imagine being afraid of the sun in Los Angeles. And this is all being a mile and a half from the Rampart police station, which, historically is probably the most corrupt police station in U.S. history, but still, right? And so the human trafficking laws that would have saved my life didn't come into effect until the early 2000s. The child trafficking and human trafficking laws. But yeah, child labor. When I'm 8 years old, we moved into this old hospital. Before it was blue, it was gray. And while it was still gray, they have these air vents that they wanted to clean, and they would put me in this oversized hazmat suit, and I would spend all day with this stuff called naval jelly, which is a highly toxic compound, scrubbing out these vents. And at first it was like an adventure. You're going to go in and you're wearing like a spacesuit and you're going to save the planet. But after doing it for weeks, it became a torture. And then I would fall asleep in there. I would just fall asleep. And then you would think it couldn't get worse than that. And then they would kind of leave me alone, and I'd be taking care of my brother. And then I would get to be 8.5. And this is at a time where my mother is on. She would disappear for years at a time to go train to be a machine counselor. And then they came over one day to the dormitories, and they said, we need you to work on a project over at the main building, and bring me up to a higher floor. And I walk in and I see something I've never seen before. I see all these rooms stripped down to the studs in the whole old hospital. And I see this kind of brown paper, and under the brown paper, there's tufts of stuff that looks like cotton candy.
Oh, yeah.
And they give me kitchen gloves, and they tell me that I'm going to be putting the cotton candy, or what's called fiberglass.
Right, yeah.
With just kitchen gloves. And not even a mask. Into large industrial trash bags. And there were hundreds of these by the time we were done. And I would fill them up all day. By the time I was done, I quickly realized that I would have fiberglass in my mouth, in my throat, and all over my 8-year-old body. And at that point, I was living in this, there were 5 of us living in like a tiny 100 square foot studio apartment. My brother slept in the kitchen. I slept on the floor. It was such a tenement. My little brother and my stepfather, my mother slept on the bed. My older brother slept in the kitchen, or the kitchenette. Wasn't even a kitchen. And then I slept on the floor. There were so many roaches that every night that we slept in that room. I was out of the dorms for a little bit because they wanted me to take care of my little brother. I slept on a cushion and I would pull my shirt over my mouth so that cockroaches wouldn't crawl in my mouth. That's the level that we're talking about. But when I would get home, my parents wouldn't come home till 10 or 11. So I would do these scalding hot baths every night that I would come home from the fiberglass work. And then my pores would open up and the fiberglass would float out. And then I would go back and do it all again the next day.
This is so hazardous. It's so crazy that this was allowed to happen. I mean, oh gosh, really, really disgusting. Now, surely, I mean, part of the allure for people of Scientology is that there's all these celebrities involved. So did you at some point have a feeling like, well, if this Scientology stuff weren't true, all these famous, amazing celebrity people, they wouldn't be here, right? You got like Giovanni Ribisi or whatever and Tom Cruise in there. And it's like, you know, Danny Masterson who's now in prison forever. I mean, you've got these people there.
For life, literally. He's life in prison.
He's life in prison for all the things he did. Like you have these people in there, and surely there's like the patina of legitimacy, or like these people are smart, these people are successful. Surely they're seeing something that that we're benefiting from. Is that in your mind at all, or are you just like whatever? Let me get through another day of fiberglass removal because I'm 8.5 years old.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they were very proud when I was a kid of John Travolta. You know, when I was 8, right. You know, my mother, one of the only movies my mother ever took me to when I was a kid was Saturday Night Fever. We walked from the Blue Building all the way to Hollywood Boulevard so that we could see this film. So with John Travolta. So, yeah, I mean, listen, I met Giovanni Ribisi for the first time before he was famous when I was 16 years old. Right. So, but really where that was really true is when I was wearing, and again, one of the things I'm most embarrassed about when you look back, it's funny what you're embarrassed and humiliated about. I had a hard time writing about this, was wearing full military whites in Central Florida in like a resort town. You know, when I think back on it at 19, but when I was there, that's where their most elite people go. It's called the Flag Land Base. Okay. And it's all in this hotel, this beautifully restored hotel called the Fort Harrison. And there, all the celebrities and successful people, most successful people in Scientology are coming from around the world. And that, you know, Tom Cruise has a condo there. So I'm meeting famous artists like Gottfried Heldwein. I meet, you know, Chick Corea, his manager, college professors, physicists, lawyers, academics, like from all over the world. And for sure, and I'm 18 years old, 17 years old. And for sure, Jordan, I was starting to feel like a slave. I was starting to have concepts. I didn't even know what a slave was because I'd never been educated and I couldn't write. I could read at a decent level just from studying the doctrine. But I started to have this concept of being controlled. And then every time I would meet some famous person, I met John Travolta when I was 18 or 19 for the first time. I would go, well, you know, and he was nice. And you'd meet these really rich and successful people in every kind, like, again, academics, lawyers, doctors. And you'd say, I mean, Gottfried Heldwein. I mean, even Neil Gaiman's father, you know, Neil Gaiman wasn't Neil Gaiman yet. I met him when I was 19. He was this incredibly impressive guy. People don't know this. Neil Gaiman's father not only was a confidant of Hubbard, international spokesperson for Scientology, but ran Scientology's secret police for a period of time.
Crazy that even exists, the secret police. Man, I got to ask about the celebrity thing, because why do you think those people were even there? I mean, now that you know Scientology is 100% bullshit and a cult that's, you know, authoritarian control cult, why are these people in it? What do they need from it?
You know, Tony Ortega talks about this, and I think he has it right. I mean, it's only recently that I've really, I mean, listen, up until 2 years ago when I decided to write this thing, I've been living a double life, disconnected from myself, right? Literally. And so I've been thinking a lot about that the last few months as the books come out and I get all these notes. But, you know, I think that, and I think Tony has said this, and I think he's right about this, is this guy that writes a lot about Scientology. He's got a blog. It's all about you. Right? You do this stuff called this machine counseling where you're supposed to be getting rid of, it's kind of like Freud used it. It was this kind of, it's called, Freud called it abreaction therapy, where it's similar to EMDR, which is evidence-backed, where you relive all the painful moments of your life to take away the emotional distress it's causing you. So there's something to that. And you do it with this machine, but how the machine works, they're kind of lying to you in terms of what it does. And once you believe in the machine, they own you. Okay. But I think that it's all focused on you. The courses are all you. There's a very narcissistic, it's a you-based group. It is not a community group. You're getting rid of all of your past pain so that you can, the goal here with the Scientology ladder, to do all the Scientology levels. Okay. And a lot of these celebrities, Tom Cruise is level 8, the highest level you can do in Scientology. So is Greta Van Susteren. So is Judy Norton-Taylor, who was the girl, Mary Ellen from the Waltons. And there's, John Travolta, I think he's gone to level 5. Kelly Preston, before she died, was level 8. Kirstie Alley was level 8. Okay. And you're seeing all these people. But basically, it's all, what you're trying to do is get rid of all these moments of past pain. And then you do this at a more and more kind of cosmology level. There's all these secret levels, but only 5 or 3% of Scientologists end up, because it costs hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million to do. And so very few people get to the secret levels where it gets really like into this odd cosmology sci-fi. But you're trying to get rid of all this pain so that you could return to being, so you can permanently get rid of your body and be returned to your godlike state. And it's all you based.
Right. So that appeals to people whose like lives revolve around their image and themselves and their personal.
I think so. Yeah. And if you go to Celebrity Center, the way that Scientology caters to celebrities, Jordan, is like a level of, I mean, I've been on a lot of movie sets. I have friends that are famous actors that have nothing to do with Scientology. So I've been around that world, director, of Hollywood. And so I've seen the way that actors get treated on film sets, which is very nice. They get paid a lot of money. But compared to how you as a famous actor would be treated at Scientology's Artist Center, like when Will Smith and Jada Smith, there's a secret Scientology a celebrity parking lot. So they never have to see people. And when you go to the parking lot below the building at the Celebrity Center, the Artist Center, there's a thing that's covered, and you press another button if you're Will Smith, and then you go to a secret parking lot where you can go up a private tunnel to the president's office where you get your counseling in secret.
I see. Yeah, I've seen that entrance because there's all these weird security guys. And, as a guy who used to work security in his 20s, I always make small talk with security guys because I'm like, what's going on? How's your day? It's very hot out here. And, the security guys at normal places, like a bank, they'll be like, one of those days, because they're retired cops or something. The Scientology security guys are weird as shit, dude, especially at the Celebrity Center. And I quickly was like, this isn't a real security guy. Like, this is like a cheap uniform. This is like a cheap look. This guy's not in good shape. Like, this isn't a retired cop. He's just like a schlep. And I don't know. You tell me. I suspect that they're just recruits like anyone else who are recruited from like Slovenia to go move to the big city in America. And they're like, your job is to stand outside for 11 hours a day in the sun wearing this vest. And they're like, okay, because they're not on it. They're not vigilant. They don't have the security look. I can tell it's fake.
It's a mix. Can I tell you? I'll tell you a story that I've never said.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a mix, like the internal security people that are part of the C group, the galactic slavies, or the religious paramilitary group. They're very much like that. They're trained in Scientology security, and they ride bikes. And it's kind of they don't look like or feel like security guards. They feel like kind of a robot force. But there are a lot of, when you go over to the Celebrity Center, the Artist Center, there's a lot of famous people. You got Isaac Hayes walking around. You have, there's a lot of celebrities walking, from Jeffrey Tambor, Will Smith, Beck, Jason Lee, who's now left.
Oh man, Jeffrey Tambor is a Scientologist?
No, he's out now. He's out now, but he was in. My mother was Jeffrey Tambor's counselor. Right. So
I'm surprised they can leave, because isn't the whole thing like, hey, don't leave, maybe we'll blackmail you?
I think that, that's probably a huge part of what's happening with Cruise and Travolta. It's both. It's like, it's all about you. Plus we have this shit on you.
Yeah.
But, I'll tell you a crazy story that I've never told, but somebody very close to me, my close to me's kid was there's a secret Scientology secret. It's not secret. There's a Scientology Hogwarts school in rural Oregon, about 2 hours from Portland, in a town called Sheraton, where rich Scientologists send their kids, called the Delphian School. And it's posh. And, you know, I have somebody close to me that his kid was going there in high school, and he started a relationship with Bella Cruz, Tom Cruise's kid. So they were in a relationship for a year or two. And, you know, and that kid came over to my house one day. He said he was near my house when I was living at the Talmadge near downtown LA, and said he had his girlfriend with him. And I was talking to them in my living room for probably 20 minutes before I realized it was Tom Cruise's kid. And she told me some of the craziest stuff, which you should ask me about. But one day they were at the Celebrity Center and the Artist Center, and they have retired cops there. And they just look like they're like hunched over, but they're packing heat. And a guy comes into the parking lot, and my friend's kid is with his girlfriend, Bella Cruz, and a guy starts approaching the cafe, which is what you walk into before you go into the entrance, with two katanas.
All right.
The off-duty, there's a guy who looks like an old man who's like slunched over, but really he's there to protect Bella. So he sees that this guy is walking and isn't stopping. So he walks closer to the guy because the guy's still in the parking lot. And now he's obscured. Like my friend and Bella can't see the guy, but they can still see the police the guy in the suit, the bad, crappy suit. And he yells to the guy, "Stop." And then he pulls out a gun and "Stop, or I'll stop you." I'm paraphrasing. Shoots and kills the guy.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, it's Hollywood. It's still Hollywood. You're still, when you're at that place, only a few blocks from Hollywood Boulevard. Right?
Wow.
So, yeah.
What year was this?
God, late, early aughts.
Okay, so I wasn't in LA yet. Tell me what Bella told you. If you think it's interesting enough for the show, you said ask me about this.
Yeah, and I've never said it before, but also it was one of the things that at that point I was kind of had a foot in and a foot out. I was like looking at all the blogs. I was looking at Anonymous, but I was trying to hold on to my friends and my family because I know if I say that I have doubts, if I say I'm against it, that I'm going to lose everyone I've ever known. So you kind of find this like middle ground where you're kind of like part of it, but you're not part of it. So I'm all over these anti-Scientology sites, and I'm looking at Anonymous, and my mind is reeling, you know, and I'm trying to be in this middle ground that's impossible to be in for very long. And one of the things that I read on one of these blogs was that they'd estranged Bella, and I've never talked about this from publicly. They'd estranged Bella from her mom and told her when they expel you from Scientology, a yellow piece of paper comes out on goldenrod paper comes out that calls you a suppressive person, like you're evil to like Charles Manson or Hitler. Like the minute Scientology sees your name on a paper like that, they literally believe they would see you as a Hitler character. Not like, oh, we have to treat him like a Hitler character. No, that's how powerful the goldenrod is. They believe it. And they could have loved you the day before. So she told me, and I'd read about this on blogs, and I didn't believe it. It was one of the things that kept me in. It's like the media is lying. And Bella, who doesn't even know me, starts telling me about how her mother, Nicole Kidman, who she hasn't seen in 10 years, is a suppressive person. And that the church, that I'm calling it a church, the chooch, or, you know, it's I don't want to insult. Sometimes I say I don't call it a cult because I don't want to insult cults. Okay, but they had convinced her as a little kid that her mother was evil and suppressive, and that's why so Bella and Connor don't have a relationship with Nicole.
That's so sad.
Yeah,
it's really. I mean, we could do. It's a whole separate. You could do multiple hours, a dozen hours on Scientology alone from each person who leaves because there's just so much going on. You said there's a happy ending. There's so much more in the book, of course. I mean, it's a long book, but I'm gonna skip ahead to the happy ending because at some point you end up at the London School of Economics, which is pretty unbelievable. Like, how did that even happen? What would possess you, Jamie, to apply to the London School of Economics? That's like being like, hey, now that I can read at a 4th grade level, I'm thinking about going to Harvard. Like, what?
I mean, and it was like that. It was kind of an impossible situation, you know, At 19, I'm starting to really feel like a slave. I'm in Clearwater, Florida. I've been trafficked for punishments in the engine room of the Freewinds, where I'm forced to clean the bilge.
Boat.
Yeah, and you can't clean a bilge. It's a Sisyphean task. It's a form of punishment. I'd end up in the infirmary with heat prostration, and I'm being, and I vow if they ever send me here for punishment again, I'm going to escape, because I'm flying into Aruba the first time they send me there for punishment, where I'm weeks in the engine room, and everybody else is in Aruba mode. They're partying. And I know I'm about to be put through a physical labor gauntlet, being yelled and screamed at of almost torture in an engine room that's 110 degrees. And so I escaped. So I said, if they're ever going to send me back here again, I'm going to escape. I'm leaving. I'm not coming back here again. I felt like a slave. And so when they told me I was going back 6 months later, I did it. What I did was, I describe it in the book, but it's a very harrowing escape, and where I have to pretend I throw all my belongings as a sack. I'm pretending to do laundry. I had to switch cabs 5 times. I had to wait 4 days before I went to the airport because they'd be waiting for me there. So it was quite something.
This is like escaping. This is like being a fugitive from the federal marshals or something like that. They've got people at the airport. They got people at all the bus stations. I mean, this is crazy.
So I have a relative that had said to me when I was 16 that if I ever wanted to deal with my illiteracy, that I could come live with her, but I would have to be dealing with my illiteracy, and I could that I could stay there as long as I wanted and do more education as long as I was in school. I could be beauty school. You could be a plumber. You don't have, but you get free rent, a car, and an allowance and health insurance if you ever want to come here, if you decide to deal with your illiteracy.
Wow.
I was too illiterate. Like, to be illiterate at 16 years old, to be sitting, we moved to Oregon for 2 years, and I would sit at the back of these classes at South Eugene High School, unable to write, unable to do basic math. And it was just humiliating. So when we went back to the movement when I was 16, we moved there when I was 13. It was about 2.5 years. We moved back when I'm 16. This relative flies me to New York and says, you can stay here under these conditions. I just don't know. It's hard to describe what adult illiteracy is like, Jordan. It's a weird place to live, but I could read, but I just couldn't write. So I said no, and I went. I'm escaping at 19. I call this relative after the escape from a hotel room where I've switched cabs 5 times. And I said, does the offer still stand? And she says, yes. And I said, send me a ticket. You can leave tomorrow. And I said, no, 4 days from now. I go to New York and I start doing remedial classes at a community college, learning to write, learning to do basic 5-year-old math. It's brutal. I do that for a year, and I go to a small private liberal arts school in Westchester County, New York, and I get a girlfriend that is taking inner city kids without transcripts or any educational pass. I hear that they'll let you in. My relative hears this story, so she's like, you should try, because they're taking kids without pass.
They'll take anyone.
Yeah.
And you are anyone, my friend.
Yeah. So I get into a normal college through this back door. Cool. And I meet a girl.
Unbelievable.
And I meet a girl within the first 3 weeks, and she sees that I can barely write.
Right. At least you had your priorities straight. First thing I did was get a girlfriend.
Yeah. And she's like, you're not going to survive here, not being able to. So what she starts doing is, for a year, she's rewriting my papers. And then 6 months into doing that, she's like, okay, you're going to write them and I'm going to correct them.
That's better. That's a better system.
Yeah. So we kind of go through this process. And then while I'm there, the only thing I'm ever good at, and I find this out at the community college, is when I go into these basic economics classes, it was really strange. I would go into these classes and I felt like it was like someone that could just play the piano. I understood the charts. It was the first time in my life I ever just understood something. And my economics teacher comes to me, who's also the provost, the vice president of the college, and the chairman of the economics department. And he says, James, you're getting 80% on your economics exams, and I believe you have a little bit of a literacy problem. And I was like, where's he going? Where's he going with this?
Like, you probably should be getting 100, but you can't read all of the things on the test. And that might be an issue.
Yeah. So then he says to me, you can come to the castle. They had a castle as their administrative building, to my office. And why don't you give me the tests verbally and see if your scores go up?
That's interesting.
When he said that to me, Jordan, I literally thought he was gay. I thought he was gay. He's married with kids, and I think this guy is going to ask me to go down on him. That's how worthless I felt.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So this kid tells me about the London. When I applied to the special program at Georgetown. I applied to the London School of Economics. it was like a wing and a prayer. I would kind of, this girlfriend helped me prop up my GPA, and all these people rallied against me. They're supposed to only go for a year. And to get into this like year-long general course program.
Rallied on your behalf.
They rallied on my behalf, writing me letters and stuff like that. And I shouldn't, and I got in this back tour just for a year-long program at LSE. Well, the London School of Economics, which in Europe is equivalent to Harvard or Yale.
Yeah.
And I'm there 6 weeks, and I'm sitting in front of every class. There's no way I'm going to get through this place. And I'm taking furious notes. I'm religious about it. Because I'm going to do whatever I have to do to survive. Well, this professor, Gareth Austin, who's not at Cambridge, he thinks that I'm just really a rare American that's really interested in what he's doing. So he comes up to me about 6 weeks in. He's like, "Listen, if you had somebody sponsor you and you were willing to transfer to the to the economic history department, you could be under academic probation, and you could get in here. You could finish your education here." And I said to him, "Well, I have no one to do that."
Yeah.
And he said,
"Maybe you don't understand. I grew up in a cult.
Yeah, no,
I didn't have underwear, let alone a recommendation from a professor."
Yeah, and they're stalking me in London. When I was in London, they sent me a bill for $90,000 for all of the courses that I did growing up.
Scientology.
Yeah,
not
they sent
London
me a
School.
bill.
I was like, London School of Economics sent you a bill for 90 grand?
No,
That's even more expensive than I thought.
No, Scientology faxed to the dorm a bill for $90,000 for all the courses I did growing up because I was a freeloader.
Yeah.
My child labor didn't matter. Okay?
Right.
So they're stalking me in London, and this guy says, "Hey, you can be on this academic probation. If you get a B average, B plus average, you can actually be at the London School of Economics. But in order to do that, you have to drop all these math classes that I was going to fail, econometrics and statistics." And I'm like, who would do that for me? He's like, "I'm the chairman of the economic history department. I'm offering it to you." Because he thought I was interested. I wasn't interested, Jordan. I was desperate.
There's a difference, but that's not troubling with that.
Okay. And somehow, and I don't know how much detail you want to get into, but like, I don't know how I did it, but it was qualitative economics.
You must have had serious imposter syndrome. Like, they're going to figure out I don't belong here. And,
For the first 6 to 8 weeks when I'm walking to the school every day, and this is literal, I'm like, when I get there today, there's going to be butlers or chaperones or some sort of like officials waiting for me at the university saying that there was a mistake on the form.
Right.
And that I was going home.
Mm-hmm.
It was terrifying. And just, and it was brutal. Like, I feel like what I had to, like when I was 19, a year and a half before I went to LSE, and I'm taking these remedial classes, maybe it's 2 years, literally I got there, and 5.5 years later, I graduate from the London School of Economics.
Unbelievable. Okay? Not bad for a kid who couldn't read or write a few years
before. I could read because I was studying the doctrine.
Write.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I remember my grandmother coming in while I'm doing these remedial classes at Westchester Community College. This is the relative that gave me the opportunity. And she says, "What's going on?" I was like, "I can't figure this comma thing out."
Yeah, well, you're not alone.
Yeah. And she sits there for 45 minutes trying to explain a comma to me. And I was like, that's insane. I'll never do that. So the fact that I do what I do now, I mean, come April, when I have one more graphic novel, I have one coming out this week. I have a graphic novel coming out in April. It'll be 6 books.
That's incredible. Jamie, though, commas... Call me when you can use a semicolon. Then I'm going to be impressed.
Yeah.
Then I'll be impressed.
Yeah. So one of the things that helped me at the London School of Economics is that I'm there with all of that school represents more countries than the United Nations.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
Yeah,
really
and so
incredible.
I think, and then when you do your exams, you're a code word, and someone outside of your department is grading your test. They don't know who you are, so they probably thought that my writing issue was because I was a kid from Beijing or Kuala Lumpur. So there's lots of kids that probably are writing English in weird ways. So I think that helped me. But by then,
that's a good point. Yeah, they're like, his writing is terrible. Is it as bad as the guy from North Korea? Nah, it's about the same. All right, fine.
Yeah,
we'll figure this out.
Yeah, but I knew the stuff, and and honestly, I mean, this is a weird thing to say, and I'd be curious what you think of it, but. In that 2 years before I went, literally when I did the application for this program at Georgetown and the London School of Economics, I thought for sure I was never going to get in, even though these people were rallying around me and encouraging me. And I'm spending weeks applying for something and getting letters and all this stuff for something that is not going to go my way. So I'm basically gearing up to fail.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
I had a nervous breakdown.
Oh, man.
And when the applications went in, because I was just like shoving my head in my own failure, and I ended up sleeping for almost 48 hours straight at my grandmother, leaving the dorms and sleeping for 48 hours straight at my grandmother's house because I was trying to do something where I could never do it. So when I got into those places, even temporarily, I was shocked. And then in order to catch up, I would study for 15 hours a day, and that would last a year. I literally feel like to this day, I have physiological problems in my body from this period of austerity studying in London, because I would have to study 10 times to do what these kids. Anyway,
I know the feeling. That's like law school. Like, look at all these smart kids, and they study 3 hours a day. And I'm like, I did less in an 18-hour study day, and it's just you have to outwork everyone if you're not smarter than everyone. That's just how it works. And luckily, you had a bunch of years of cleaning fiberglass and vents with navel jelly or whatever it is. So nothing was going to be quite that bad. Even some economics exams. But man, tell us about the fancy party you went to. I think this is a really good cap in the book. It's quite an illustration of how far you'd come.
Yeah, I mean, I get back from one of the big mistakes I made was not staying in New York. I get back from London, and I decided to go back to LA to try to connect with my mother, who never gave crap about me. I mean, she'd throw me away like used toilet paper from the day I was born, and that never changed. She always treated me like that. And unless I was doing something in Scientology that she liked, then there would be this like little carrot of crumb of validation. But I go back to LA and I get a job working for a documentary film company, and they're sending me to Cannes. They're not paying me a lot, but they're sending me to Cannes. So,
right.
2 years after I graduate college, maybe it's a year, 6 years after, no, a year, 6 years after escaping the movement, I'm walking down the street in Cannes, working for this documentary film company, and this beautiful woman walks up to me and starts yelling at me in French. And I thought, I must have been swearing or something. I mean, I'm the ugly American. I did something American she didn't like is what's going through my head. And eventually she starts going English. And she says, I know you. I said, lady, you don't know me. I'm here on work, and there's no way we could possibly know each other. And she's like, wait. And she's racking her brain. And then finally she says, do you go to the London School of Economics? And then we go for a coffee. And then that night she calls me at my hotel and she says, can you come to a party tomorrow? My mother is having a party and you're going to need a tuxedo. And I said, I have a black suit. She says, that won't do. You need a tuxedo, but come here and we'll just figure it out. I get there at 10 o'clock in the morning in Monaco, where the party is. She picks me up in a used shitty car and drives me to one of 3 houses in all of Monaco, because Monaco is all apartments. There's the palace, and then one of these 2 houses. Her mother is a direct descendant of Napoleon, is the imperial princess of France.
Wow.
And they're having a party that night for French lifestyles of the rich and famous. And the Portuguese maid drives me, who doesn't speak English, drives me in another crappy car to town, where I get fitted for a tuxedo that I walk out with. And then, the house is like got 40-foot frescoes, and they're all preparing for this party. And then people live in the bottom of the house. And I put on my tux pants, and I realized that everything fits perfectly. It's a perfect fit, except the guy didn't hem the pants. And I'm panicking.
Rookie mistake.
And this very beautiful older woman kind of sees me in this like panic, and I'm half dressed, and all these musicians are getting dressed for the party. And she walks up to me and
you have underwear at this point in your life.
Yeah, I've got underwear.
Finally.
Yeah. And I've got underwear. She's probably 50, and she starts tugging at my pants. And then I realize that she's offering to hem my pants.
Ah, okay.
Okay. So I take my pants off. I've got underwear, and she goes away. And 15, 20 minutes later, this woman walks back. I mean, she kind of measures, and my pants are perfectly hemmed. Okay, we go up to the party, which is a series of 30, 40 tables, and there's a stage with this massive living room with 40-foot paintings. And where everybody's in tuxes, the queen, not Princess Stephanie, I think is her name, she's there. And the Imperial Princess of France, my friend's mom, Deborah Noyan. She went to Juilliard. She comes out and plays this classical opening thing in piano, right? And then she invites the next musician on, who she says flew in from Spain.
I see.
And there's a 7-foot harp. And the woman walks out to the harp. And it's the woman that hemmed my pants.
Wow.
And she looks at me like, I'm like, 3 tables back. She looks at me, smiles, and winks.
Yeah.
And then starts to play.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, that's the real true incredibleness of my life, is growing up in Mexican neighborhoods in the worst kind of poverty you can imagine. And then all of a sudden I'm with the richest people in the world. And that's what's made my life kind of incredible. When in writing the book, I kind of thought my life was boring. But when I for the first time, when I finished it, I was like, this is crazy, because the stuff that I do now, I didn't even aspire to do. People thought I was ambitious. When I got into London School of Economics, I remember being in my grandmother's living room, we got the second you're in. And I did not believe it. And we're sitting in her foyer, like right downstairs from her like formal living room. And she says, even at that point, she's confused. And she says, how are you doing this? And what I'm thinking is, what I say to her is, I don't know. What I'm thinking, Jordan, is I'm desperate. Desperation.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
There's this anecdote in your book where a Frenchman at the party leans over and whispers, I envy you because you possess yourself. Actually, he probably said, I envy you because you possess yourself.
Yeah.
But what do you think he meant by that?
I think because I had grown up in this weird bubble, and then I was not brave. Maybe I was brave in the sense that I was always terrified and numb. I'd had all these physical things happen to me that we haven't gotten to, but I was the kind of person that I would just throw myself into something even if I thought I was going to fail. Like I almost had a nervous breakdown applying to higher education. And I had this kind of, when you grow up in LA in a sci-fi cult and you're around gang members, I'm dealing with gang members, I'm dealing with drug addicts, I'm dealing with the Armenian kids in the neighborhoods, like there's all this kind of inner city stuff that I'm dealing with. I mean, there's one thing that, did you listen to the book? Oh yeah, there's one thing that isn't in the book where my brother was involved with gangs when I was 10 or 11. And this gang from South Central, this kid he was involved with threatens to shoot up our where we're staying. We're staying with my stepfather in like a tenement house across from the Big Blue building. And we had to spend 2 weeks sleeping on the floor of my mother's counseling room inside Scientology because this gang member was a credible threat against our lives.
Wow.
Right. So when you grow up around that, and then you're also and you're dealing with all the top celebrities in Scientology in Central Florida, and you're sent to Copenhagen, and then you're living for a year in Southern England, among the most famous, my first day in Southern England, I meet Woody Woodmansey, David Bowie's drummer from Spiders from Mars. Right. So it's this extreme, I had this kind of feeling of just being kind of comfortable with every kind of person because I'd just been around every kind of person. And I think that I had a sense of just carefreeness about people. I wasn't intimidated. The guy was an investment banker. He'd pulled up in a Lamborghini and I was situated but next to him on purpose. And I just think that this guy, looked like James Bond. He was probably early 30s, rich, and was around a lot of people that had all just been bred for that and all acted a certain way. And he's seeing this guy that really doesn't fit into this environment, but he's dressed like him. And I'm telling stories, they're asking me like, I'm from Hollywood, which everyone at the table is infatuated with.
Sure.
And I'm kind of like, well, I'm not from that part of Hollywood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
wrong Hollywood. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that I was just this exotic guy to him that was comfortable in this environment where there just wasn't anyone else like me. I mean, it was a very strange thing because I don't think I was that self-possessed, but I think I've always come across that way to people maybe I am brave. And if I am brave, it's because I've spent most of my life terrified, really, and numb, and I've tried anyway.
You wrote, only when we can use our abilities in a theater big enough that we think we might drown in it, do we find out who we really are. Tell me what you mean by that.
I mean, it's emotional to hear it.
Take your time.
I had, when you read this thing, I had endured impossible pain. My friends, there was a kid who took his own life because he was molested in that red brick building, and then he wanted to molest kids, and he had gotten married and had kids. And I love that kid. And he couldn't live with the fact that he had the urge to do that. And he didn't want to bring shame to his wife and his children, and he took his own life. And there's so many stories like that. And I had been learning about my history. You know, my grandparents, my mom, my grandmother was teaching me about my family history, and we could trace my family back to slavery. My grandparents were freed slaves, and they'd accomplished all these incredible things in America from 1865 to 1940, 75 years. My grandfather was a physician and a Tuskegee Airman. And my great-grandfather was a doctor in a black town where Alex Haley grew up. And I'm learning about this larger world that I didn't even know I was connected to. And I realized there was something bigger than me that I was plugging into. And it just made me want to try and do the impossible. I have a kid's book coming out on an imprint of Penguin Random House.
Jeez, man, you have been busy. This is like the third, fourth book you're mentioned on the show.
It'll be 6 books by April.
Take a vacation already.
Yeah, this book comes out at the end of fall of 2026, but it's called A Kid's Book About the Impossible. It's not even online yet, you know, about how I did it. And I think that I just put myself in situations. I just endured so much pain, and I was so numb that I had made this equation in my head that illiteracy and poverty mean pain. So affluence and means and education must mean joy. I was wrong. Okay. But I just felt that, you know, the only way we grow in life, the only way we get bigger, the only way we get stronger, and again, I wasn't doing this intellectually. This is me looking back, is if we push ourselves to do things that we know we can't do. Not we don't wonder if we can do it, that we know we can't do it. And we try anyway. And if we do that 100 times, I talk about how I taught, this is what a kid's book about the impossible is about. And if we do that 100 times and 1,000 times, and when we fail, we try different techniques, because you're going to go backwards a lot. You know, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. That's the definition of insanity. Well, the definition there, you know, Einstein talked about, you know, failure being trying 1,000 times, or Edison trying 1,000 times and still doing it again. What's the difference between that and insanity? Well, in the case of Einstein, in the case of Edison, they're doing things differently. Every time they do something, they change it a little bit, and then they change it a little bit. So if insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, genius is doing something a different way over and over again until you get a different result. So I was willing to make a step, get punched in the face, slammed on the ground, go back 5 feet, get up, and go another inch, and then go back again. But then 3 years later, I go forward 6 feet.
I see.
And it was willing to, because I endured so much pain, if there's one thing I was good at, that was very painful, is I can endure pain like no one you've ever met. Like, I can endure it. I can steel myself. And I just think that if you are willing to slide back a lot and then try it slightly differently, to the point where you're 10 years in and you know you're going to fail, but you change it just a little bit because you're analyzing and you're curious, you can do impossible things.
Man, I know I'm dating myself with what I'm about to say, but you've come a long way, baby. Remember that slogan? Remember those billboards?
Yeah. I mean, it's surreal. You know, it's surreal. Yeah. And again, you know, you said it in the beginning, it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels, there's a lot of survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these kids, and people act like it's in my past, like it's this thing that I conquered that's, 40 years ago. But really, Jordan, it's not in my past. These kids are still like, and this is really the point of why I'm here. One of the questions, probably the most important question people should ask me is why, after all these years, when you were living a secret life where your agents didn't know and your publishers didn't know, did you come out and tell everyone and expose this part of yourself?
Yeah. And
the answer is that this happened to thousands of kids on 4 continents over 40 years, and we're all aging out.
Yeah.
And this is the story of the kids of the religious paramilitary. And even with Going Clear, and even with what Leah's show, the story of
Leah Remini.
The story of the lost children of Scientology has never been told. And I really do believe if people knew what happened to us in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, what happened to us kids in that environment, they would stop it. I feel like even if you looked at what just happened in Gaza, it was just too many dead kids, that all these people that would never speak out against Israel, and I don't want to get into the politics of it, started speaking out against it. Why? Too many dead kids. There's like a tolerance for the suffering. There's a line for the suffering of children. And I felt that our story being hidden, the lost children of Scientology's paramilitary, these thousands of kids. And we all, so much, they have autoimmune disease. They're all doing construction. Most of them, some of the more successful ones get lucky because they become contractors. But if people knew what happened to us, the lost children's story, which is the story that I wrote, that people would stop. It would be the end.
Jamie Mustard, thank you so much. Super interesting. Man, what a story. And you really did. I mean, look, you beat the odds. You're highly successful. I'm curious, just I top my head here. I know we're out of time. We've been out of time. But is your mom still in the cult? Do you have any hope that you'll see her again, or is it too late?
No. I mean, my mother's still in the cult. And again, I don't like to call it a cult because I don't like to insult cults, but
yeah.
And this is what I'm talking about when it's still happening to me. 2 months ago, 2 to 3 months ago, there was a major story on me in the Daily Mail. When they didn't tell me that, they told me they were just going to do an excerpt of the book. Well, a couple weeks before the story was going to come out, the story ended up getting pushed over and over again. They said, well, we reached out to Scientology in England to see if they wanted to comment. What we got back was a declaration from your mother.
Oh, of course.
And it's scary. Whatever my mother said, and what this story is online. You can Google Jamie Mustard Daily Mail and read this story. Yeah. So one of the things that's incredible about that story is Scientology secret police was effective with whatever they responded with, because the Daily Mail, you can VPN it, but they ended up only releasing the story in the United States and not Great Britain or Commonwealth countries.
They have different libel laws in the UK where basically you can sort of say someone libeled and slandered you and they're screwed. Yeah,
and one of the real weirdest moments in before the book came out was the Daily Mail contacting me and saying, we sent Scientology locally in England. We asked them if they wanted to respond to your allegations. And my response to them was like, what are you talking about? I'm not making any allegations. I said what happened to me. And they were like, so I thought it was weird the way they phrased it.
Yeah, right.
Because I didn't think they were allegations. Here's how my mother came. They said, we want to include their responses in the article. And I said, well, I think that's a good idea. I know what happened to me.
Right.
Okay. They can't disprove. There's too many kids around to corroborate it.
Yeah.
And
they're just going to say that you're delusional and made all the things up. Yeah.
So here's one of the incredible things that was in my mother's declaration. Okay. I talk about in the book signing a billion-year contract when I'm 5 with an X. My mother comes back. Well, that's one of my allegations. It's my story. My mother comes back and says, and this is all the denials are like this in that Daily Mail article. It's incredible. That's not true. I was there and he was 7 and it was adorable.
So he did sign the contract, except he got the year wrong, and we all thought it was cute.
Well, no, she was saying she saw me sign a contract when I was 7, not 5, for 1 billion years. I still believed in the Easter Bunny and the Sandman, the Tooth Fairy, and Santa Claus.
This denial was not run by a PR expert. Hey, you might want to refute the core thing. No, we'll just change the number around. And it's like, that's not very persuasive.
Yeah, so when you read Scientology's denials in that article, so they're still doing this to me. They're still... They're doing psychological operations on me now.
Yeah.
Scientology does not turn the other cheek. I don't know how much you know about that, but they have an intelligence wing. Right. And anybody that goes against Scientology, they write a program to destroy your life. Leah, me, whoever you are.
Yeah, that's really crazy. I mean, we've definitely gotten letters from them before, like, "Hey, these are untrue," and I'm like, "Well, I'll take it up with them. This is a media outlet. I read the book. I'm not here to sort of." We're not adjudicating that. And then they're like, well, take the episode down. And it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. But if you really want to sue me, we can go to Discovery. And I've got a list of documents I would love to subpoena from Scientology.
Yeah. I mean, listen, they will never allow Discovery in what happened to me or these other kids.
Right. No, it's like, hey, you really want to take this to the mat, then like, yeah, like I don't want to do that, but like, let's do Discovery. I bet I could find somebody to help me with that. Oh, wait, you want us to provide documentation now? Yeah, I'm going to get Jamie Mustard out there. I'm going to get Leah Remini out there. I got a couple other people that they're like, if they ever do this, you got to call me the day that happens. And so I don't think that they're really interested in that. I think they're interested in sort of scaring these stories away, which I can understand.
Jordan, what they admit to in their denials in the Daily Mail article, what they admit to in the Daily Mail article is terrifying. I mean, it's unbelievable. Yeah. Like it's just unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, it's an incredible thing, and it's a hard thing. I mean, I don't want to say that I'm afraid. But, do I want to live my life? Like, I feel like with now the secret police, whatever their plots are against me and whatever they're doing against me, they've contacted my brother and my mother who are still in, that though they have said things to my family's called me and is messing with me. They've called people that know me, like they're messing with me. And, but mostly I feel like it's, psychological operations.
But you know what? If what you were doing wasn't true and if what you were doing wasn't actually damaging them, they would just be ignoring you. So I think that signals that you have a win on your hands. One
of the reasons I never wanted to speak, have you ever read Ender's Game?
No, I've heard of that. What is that? Is that a sci-fi novel?
Yeah, it's written by an ex-Mormon named, he's a Mormon, Orson Scott Card. And if you ever read Ender's Game, if you want to know what the Cadet Org was like, the Lord of the Flies thing, it was a slum version of Ender's Game where they recruit kids to fight wars for the society. Mm-hmm. It's a movie too. It's a very good movie. You should watch it with your wife. You'll love it. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, Ender's Game. But in the book version, there's a guy named Achilles, and at one point, the heroes in the film, he's another child genius. They see him almost get killed, and they rescue him. Well, Achilles is a sociopath, and he can't stand that Ender and this other guy named Bean almost saw him die. So he becomes obsessed with assassinating Ender, who saved him, and Bean, who saved him. And the reason I never spoke out is I never wanted to know, like, what I write about that happened to me. It's humiliating. I don't want anyone to know any of the things that we've talked about today.
Right.
Right. I don't want people to know that I was standing in Florida at 19 wearing naval uniform and that was walking around Los Angeles like that. It's completely embarrassing to me. There's no upside in me. Like, it's just, the whole thing is covered in, like, I'm released it now. Since the book's come out, I'm starting for the first time in my life to be shame-free. I've placed it where it belongs.
Good for you, man.
Yeah.
Hey, look, I know we went way over time. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I really appreciate your vulnerability, and you're a great storyteller. And I just want to thank you for your time and for coming on and being so open about everything. I think that's very admirable. I really appreciate you giving me the platform and the opportunity to tell this story that's never been told of the lost kids of the religious paramilitary of Scientology. The story needs to see the sunlight. They create and manage Instagram profiles for underage daughters. Many accounts feature bikini stuff, revealing dancewear, suggestive poses. The followings of these little girl accounts are 75 to 90% male.
Lil Tay, who was a child influencer who was actually being managed by her older brother, recently launched an OnlyFans on her 18th birthday. She said, I took these photos at 12:01 a.m. the minute after I turned 18. She made millions of dollars.
Thanks to the OnlyFans purchase record, they are on a list, and I hope the FBI has that list.